Subscribe message only for part 1. Before the story begins, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part of this emotional and shocking story. At 19, most girls dream about college, friendships, and a future shaped by their own choices. For Ayla Carter, dreams were a luxury she could no longer afford. Life had cornered her too early, forcing her to grow up faster than she ever imagined. Ayla stood silently in front of the tall mirror in her childhood bedroom, staring at the unfamiliar reflection looking back at her. The white dress fit perfectly, yet it felt like it belonged to someone else. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the simple necklace resting against her collarbone. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Instead, her chest felt heavy, as if the air itself refused to enter her lungs. Downstairs, the house was unusually quiet. No laughter, no music, no excitement, just the distant hum of a city that didn't care what was about to happen inside these walls. Her mother, Ayla Carter, knocked softly before entering the room. Her eyes were red, clearly swollen from crying, though she tried to hide it with a forced smile. "You look beautiful," her mother whispered. Ayla didn't respond. Beauty meant nothing when freedom was being taken away. The man she was about to marry was Victor Hale, a 49-year-old billionaire tycoon whose name dominated business headlines and financial magazines. Powerful, respected, feared, he owned companies across industries and controlled more wealth than Ayla could even imagine. To the world, Victor Hale was a legend. To Ayla, he was a stranger, one she was being handed over to like a solution to a problem. The problem was debt. Crushing, suffocating debt. Her father's failed business venture had destroyed their family financially. Medical bills, loans, and threats from collectors piled up until there was no escape left. When Victor Hale's proposal arrived, cold, formal, and precise, it didn't sound like a marriage offer. It sounded like a transaction. Victor would clear every debt. In return, Ayla would become his wife. No love required, the lawyer had said calmly, sliding the papers across the table weeks earlier. Just cooperation. Ayla remembered gripping the edge of the chair, her heart pounding. She had wanted to scream, to run, to refuse. But when she looked at her parents, broken, desperate, ashamed, she knew saying no would destroy them completely. So she said yes. Now, hours later, the moment she had been dreading had arrived. The wedding took place in a grand private venue overlooking the city skyline. Everything was elegant and expensive. Crystal chandeliers, fresh roses, and perfectly dressed guests. But Ayla noticed none of it. Her eyes remained fixed on the aisle as she walked forward, each step heavier than the last. Victor Hale stood at the altar, tall and composed, wearing a dark tailored suit. His face was calm, unreadable. He didn't look like a groom filled with joy. He looked like a man attending a business meeting. When their eyes met, Ayla felt a strange chill. Not fear exactly, but uncertainty. She had expected coldness. Instead, there was something else in his gaze. Something controlled, calculated, almost distant. The vows were brief, professional. No poetic promises, no romantic words, just legal commitments spoken clearly for witnesses to hear. When the officiant announced them husband and wife, polite applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. Smiles appeared. To everyone watching, it was a fairy tale marriage between beauty and power. Only Ayla knew the truth. The reception passed like a blur. Guests congratulated her, praised her elegance, and whispered about how lucky she was. Each compliment felt like an insult. She smiled when expected, nodded when spoken to, and counted the minutes until it was over. Victor remained respectful, keeping his distance. He never touched her unnecessarily. He never whispered sweet lies. He behaved exactly as the contract implied, formal and detached. That confused her more than cruelty would have. Late that evening, the celebration ended. A black luxury car waited outside to take them to Victor's estate, a massive property located far from the city, hidden behind iron gates and tall trees. The drive was silent. Ayla stared out the window, watching streetlights blur into streaks of gold. Her mind raced with fear and unanswered questions. What kind of man had she married? What did he expect from her? And most importantly, what would happen once the doors closed behind them? Victor finally spoke, his voice calm and deep. You don't need to be afraid. Ayla turned toward him, startled. This arrangement, he continued, eyes fixed on the road, will only work if we respect each other's boundaries. She didn't know what to say. No one had spoken to her like that since this nightmare began. The car stopped in front of enormous gates that slowly opened, revealing a mansion that looked more like a fortress than a home. Lights glowed softly from inside, but the place felt intimidating, cold, distant, powerful. As they stepped inside, Ayla felt the weight of her new life press down on her shoulders. This was no longer a temporary sacrifice. This was permanent. A maid showed her to a beautifully prepared room, large, elegant, and clearly expensive. Victor paused at the doorway. Get some rest, he said. We'll talk tomorrow. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Ayla standing alone in a room that was meant to be hers, but didn't feel like home at all. She sat on the edge of the bed, her heart racing. This wasn't how she imagined the night would go. And somehow, that made her even more uneasy. Because Ayla had no idea that what would happen next, what Victor would reveal, and the truth behind this marriage, would change everything she thought she knew about him, and herself. Morning arrived quietly at the Hale estate. Sunlight filtered through tall glass windows, casting soft patterns across the polished floor of Ayla's room. She woke slowly, disoriented for a moment, before the reality of where she was settled heavily into her chest. This was no hotel. This was her new home. Or at least, the place she was now expected to live in as Victor Hale's wife. The bed beneath her was luxurious, the sheets smooth and cool, yet she felt no comfort. She sat up and listened. The house was completely silent, a silence so deep it felt intentional, as if the walls themselves were trained not to make a sound. Ayla dressed carefully in the simple clothes laid out for her, noticing how every detail had been planned in advance. Even her routine no longer felt like her own. When she stepped into the hallway, a maid appeared almost immediately, greeting her politely and guiding her toward the dining area. The mansion was massive, filled with long corridors, high ceilings, and artwork that looked priceless. Yet despite all its beauty, it felt empty. There was no warmth, no laughter, no sign of life beyond the staff who moved efficiently and quietly, as if following invisible rules. Victor was already seated at the breakfast table when Ayla arrived. He looked composed, dressed in a crisp shirt and dark trousers, reading something on his tablet. He glanced up when she entered, nodding slightly in acknowledgement. There was no awkward greeting, no forced smile, just calm recognition. Ayla took a seat across from him, unsure of what was expected of her. The table was filled with food, more than enough for 10 people, but neither of them reached for anything at first. I assume you slept well, Victor said after a moment, his tone neutral. Yes, Ayla replied quietly, though it wasn't entirely true. Her sleep had been restless, filled with strange dreams and sudden awakenings. Still, she didn't want to invite further conversation. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound coming from silverware touching porcelain. Ayla's nerves slowly tightened with every passing second. She expected questions, instructions, or demands. Instead, Victor finished his coffee, placed the cup down neatly, and looked directly at her. We need to talk, he said. Ayla's heart skipped. She straightened in her chair, bracing herself. This marriage, Victor continued, exists for practical reasons. I have no intention of pretending otherwise. He paused, as if carefully choosing his words. You are not here to entertain guests, impress society, or fulfill any role beyond what we agreed on. She frowned slightly, confused. This wasn't what she had expected at all. I value privacy, he said. And honesty. You will have complete freedom within this house and outside it. Education, work, travel, those decisions remain yours. Ayla stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. Freedom was not part of the deal she had imagined. But, Victor added calmly, there are rules. No media attention, no interviews, no discussing our arrangement with outsiders. And mutual respect. The word settled slowly in her mind. This wasn't a prison, but it wasn't a fairy tale either. It was something else entirely. Why? She asked before she could stop herself. Why marry me at all? Victor's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted briefly, something unreadable. That's not a conversation for today, he replied. After breakfast, Ayla was shown around the estate. The library alone was larger than her old apartment. There was a private garden, a gym, a music room, and even a small art studio. Everything felt carefully designed, not for display, but for isolation. As she explored, Ayla couldn't shake the feeling that this house wasn't built to welcome people, it was built to keep them out. Later that afternoon, Ayla wandered into the library again, drawn by the quiet. Rows of books stretched from floor to ceiling, covering topics from business to philosophy. She ran her fingers along the spines, surprised by how personal the collection felt. This wasn't the library of a cold businessman. It belonged to someone thoughtful, curious, perhaps even lonely. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Victor standing in the doorway. "You can use this space whenever you like," he said. "Most people don't." "Why not?" she asked. He gave a faint smile. "They're usually intimidated." Ayla hesitated, then asked the question that had been building in her mind all day. "Do you regret this?" Victor studied her carefully. "Regret is a luxury," he said. "Ideal in consequences." The answer left her unsettled. That evening, Ayla received a call from her mother. Alina's voice was lighter than it had been in months. The debts were gone. The threats had stopped. Everything was finally stable again. Ayla smiled through the conversation, assuring her mother that she was fine, that Victor was kind, that there was nothing to worry about. When the call ended, she stared at the phone in her hand, her emotions tangled. Her sacrifice had worked. But at what cost? Dinner that night was quiet again, but less tense. Victor spoke briefly about his work, never going into detail. He asked Ayla about her interests, listening without interrupting. It felt strangely normal, almost human. When the night grew late, Victor stood and said, "Your room is yours. Mine is separate. That will not change unless we both decide otherwise." Ayla's breath caught. She nodded, unable to speak. As she lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts raced. This wasn't the nightmare she had prepared herself for. It was something far more confusing. Victor Hale wasn't cruel. He wasn't demanding. And that made him unpredictable. Somewhere in this quiet mansion, a man with everything had chosen a 19-year-old girl for reasons he refused to explain. And Ayla couldn't decide which thought frightened her more, the idea that he truly didn't care, or the possibility that he did. Days passed at the Hale estate with an unsettling calm. Ayla slowly fell into a routine that felt both freeing and isolating. She woke up when she wanted, explored the house without restrictions, and even began taking online classes Victor had arranged without question when she mentioned wanting to continue her education. Everything she needed was provided, yet something was missing. The silence that once felt intimidating now felt deliberate, as if the house was protecting secrets it didn't want her to hear. With every quiet moment, Ayla became more aware that this marriage was not built on emotion, but on something far more complex. Victor remained distant but attentive. He respected her space, never intruding, never demanding. Some evenings they ate together, exchanging small conversations that never crossed into personal territory. Other nights, he didn't appear at all, and Ayla wondered where he went within his own massive home. She found herself observing him carefully, trying to understand the man behind the billionaire image. He was disciplined, precise, and guarded. But there were moments, brief, unguarded moments, when his control seemed to crack. One such moment came unexpectedly in the garden. Ayla had been walking among the tall hedges, enjoying the rare feeling of fresh air unfiltered by walls. She noticed Victor standing near the far end of the garden, staring at a stone bench half hidden by vines. He looked lost in thought, his posture unusually relaxed. Without realizing it, she approached him. "That bench," he said suddenly, without turning around. "It's been there longer than I have." Ayla paused beside him. "Did someone important to you sit there?" Victor was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "My mother." The word surprised her. She had never heard him mention family before. She believed gardens were places where people told the truth, he continued quietly. "She used to say that nature doesn't lie, even when people do." Ayla sensed this was rare, an opening he didn't intend to give. "What happened to her?" she asked gently. Victor's jaw tightened. "She died when I was young." The conversation ended there. He walked away moments later, leaving Ayla standing alone with 1,000 questions she knew better than to ask. That night, Ayla couldn't sleep. Her thoughts drifted back to Victor's words, to the sadness in his voice that didn't match the powerful man he presented to the world. She realized that beneath his wealth and control, there was pain he never allowed anyone to see. And somehow, that knowledge unsettled her more than his silence ever had. The next morning, things changed. A luxury car pulled into the estate, carrying a woman who walked through the doors with confidence and familiarity. She was elegant, older than Ayla, dressed in a sharp designer outfit that spoke of power. The staff greeted her with respect, and when Victor appeared, his reaction was immediate. "Miranda," he said. Ayla watched from a distance as the two exchanged a brief greeting. Miranda's eyes flicked toward Ayla almost instantly, scanning her from head to toe with open curiosity. "So this is her," Miranda said, her lips curling into a knowing smile. Victor's expression hardened. "Watch your tone." Miranda laughed lightly. "Relax. I'm just surprised. She's younger than I imagined." The words stung, though Ayla remained composed. She stepped forward, extending her hand politely. "I'm Ayla." Miranda shook her hand briefly. Miranda Cross. Business partner. Longtime associate. There was something unspoken in her emphasis that made Ayla uncomfortable. Over lunch, Miranda dominated the conversation, discussing investments, board meetings, and expansions. Ayla sat quietly, feeling like an outsider in a world she didn't belong to. But what troubled her most wasn't Miranda's presence, it was the tension between Miranda and Victor. There was history there, complicated and unresolved. When Victor excused himself briefly, Miranda leaned closer to Ayla. "You seem sweet," she said. "Do you know why he married you?" Ayla stiffened. "I assume for the same reasons everyone else assumes." Miranda smiled thinly. "Victor doesn't do anything without a reason. Especially something this public." Before Ayla could respond, Victor returned, and the moment passed. That evening, after Miranda left, the house felt heavier than before. Ayla found Victor in the library, standing by the window, his reflection barely visible against the dark glass. "Who is she to you?" Ayla asked carefully. Victor didn't turn around. "Someone from my past. That's all." He finally faced her. "You don't need to concern yourself with my past." The words were firm but not cruel. Still, they drew a line Ayla couldn't cross. Later that night, Ayla overheard raised voices echoing from a distant hallway. She froze, her heart racing. Victor was arguing on the phone, his voice sharp, stripped of its usual control. "No," he said. "That's not happening." A pause. "I don't care what they think. The marriage stands." Ayla stepped back quietly, her mind racing. Marriage stands. Who was questioning it? And why? She retreated to her room, closing the door behind her, feeling more uncertain than ever. This life, this strange balance of freedom and secrecy, was clearly built on fragile ground. Victor Hale was hiding something. Something powerful enough to threaten even him. And Ayla was no longer just a solution to a problem. She was now standing dangerously close to the truth. The days after Miranda's visit carried a different weight. Ayla could feel it in the way the staff moved more cautiously, in the way Victor grew quieter and more guarded. The calm routine she had grown used to began to crack, replaced by an undercurrent of tension that lingered in every room. Even the house itself seemed to respond, its silence no longer peaceful but watchful. Ayla sensed that something had been set in motion, something that could no longer be controlled as easily as Victor had hoped. Victor left early one morning without explanation. By noon, the estate felt emptier than ever. Ayla tried to distract herself by studying in the library, but her focus kept drifting. Miranda's words echoed in her mind, along with the phone conversation she had overheard. "The marriage stands." The phrase haunted her. It implied that this union was being challenged by forces far beyond her understanding. That afternoon, Ayla received an unexpected invitation. One of the senior staff informed her that Victor wanted her to attend a formal charity event with him that evening. It would be her first public appearance as Mrs. Hale. The idea filled her with unease, but she agreed. Part of her wanted answers, and she suspected this event might reveal more than Victor intended. The preparation was meticulous. A professional stylist arrived, selecting a gown that was elegant but understated. As Ayla studied her reflection, she barely recognized herself. The girl who once worried about rent and tuition was gone, replaced by someone polished and poised, shaped by circumstance rather than choice. When Victor finally entered the room, he paused briefly, his eyes resting on her longer than usual. "You'll be fine," he said quietly. The drive to the event was tense. Flashing lights from cameras greeted them as they arrived, the press eager to capture the mysterious young bride beside the powerful billionaire. Victor placed a protective hand on Ayla's back as they walked inside, a gesture that felt both reassuring and strategic. Inside the grand hall, conversations paused as people noticed them. Ayla felt the weight of countless curious gazes, heard whispers carried just loudly enough to sting. Victor navigated the crowd with ease, introducing her to influential figures, his tone calm and controlled. Ayla played her role perfectly, smiling politely, speaking only when addressed. But beneath the surface, her mind raced. As the evening progressed, Ayla noticed familiar eyes watching her from across the room. Miranda stood near a group of executives, her expression unreadable. Their gazes met briefly, and Miranda raised her glass slightly, as if acknowledging a shared secret. Ayla looked away, her unease growing. Later, Ayla excused herself and stepped onto a balcony overlooking the city. The cool night air offered a moment of relief. She leaned against the railing, trying to steady her thoughts, when Victor joined her. "You didn't have to come out here alone," he said. "I needed air," Ayla replied. "And answers." Victor sighed softly, a rare sign of weariness. "This world can be overwhelming." "That's not what I meant," she said, turning to face him. "People are watching us, judging us, and it feels like they know something I don't." Victor was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the city lights below. "There are interests involved in my life that go far beyond personal matters," he finally said. "This marriage protects certain things." "Protects what?" Ayla asked. "Me," he answered. "And now, you." The word sent a chill through her. Before she could ask more, Miranda appeared at the balcony entrance. "There you are," she said smoothly. "The board is asking for you, Victor." Victor's jaw tightened. "Excuse me." As he walked away, Miranda stepped closer to Ayla, lowering her voice. "You're braver than I thought." "I didn't choose this," Ayla replied. "No," Miranda agreed. "But you're part of it now." She hesitated, then added, "Just be careful. Victor's enemies don't fight fair." The warning lingered long after Miranda left. The ride home was quiet. Victor seemed lost in thought, his usual composure shaken. When they arrived at the estate, Ayla followed him into the study instead of heading to her room. "You said this marriage protects you," she said. "From what?" Victor closed the door behind them. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked truly conflicted. "My empire wasn't built without consequences," he said slowly. "There are people who would destroy everything I've worked for if given the chance. Weakness invites attack. And I'm, what?" Ayla asked. "A shield." Victor met her eyes. "You were my stability, publicly and legally." The truth stung more than she expected. Yet there was honesty in his words she couldn't deny. "I never intended to involve you this deeply," he added. "But once you agreed, I had no choice." Ayla felt a mix of anger and understanding collide inside her. "You should have told me." "Yes," he said quietly. "I should have." That night, Ayla lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her emotions tangled. She wasn't just a wife. She was a symbol, a strategic move in a dangerous game she barely understood. And now that she knew the truth, or at least part of it, there was no turning back. Because the moment Ayla became Victor Hale's wife, she didn't just inherit his name. She inherited his enemies. After the charity event, nothing felt the same. Ayla moved through the Hale estate with a new awareness, as if invisible eyes followed her everywhere. The truth Victor had shared, about enemies, about protection, changed how she saw everything. The quiet halls were no longer just silent, they were alert. The staff wasn't just efficient, they were trained. Even the security measures she had barely noticed before now stood out clearly. Cameras, guards, coded doors. This wasn't simply a billionaire's home. It was a fortress. Victor became more attentive in subtle ways. He didn't hover or control her movements, but there was always someone nearby now, always a driver ready, always a quiet reminder that her safety mattered. Ayla couldn't tell if this made her feel protected or trapped. Perhaps it was both. She began to understand that marrying Victor Hale hadn't just changed her social status, it had placed her directly in the line of fire of a world she had never asked to enter. One afternoon, while walking through the private garden, Ayla noticed a stranger near the outer gate. He wasn't staff. His clothes were too casual, his posture too alert. The moment their eyes met, he looked away and quickly left. Her heart pounded as she reported it to security. They assured her everything was under control, but the incident left her shaken. That night, Victor acknowledged it without emotion. "You did the right thing," he said. "You must trust your instincts." Ayla studied him carefully. "Is this what my life is now? Always watching over my shoulder?" Victor paused before answering. "Only until things settle." "When?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. The honesty surprised her. For the first time, Victor didn't have all the answers. Determined not to live in constant fear, Ayla asked for self-defense training. Victor didn't question her decision. Within days, a professional instructor arrived. The sessions were intense, physically and emotionally. Ayla's muscles ached, her confidence wavered, but she refused to quit. Each movement she mastered, each technique she learned, felt like reclaiming a piece of herself that fear had tried to steal. As the days turned into weeks, Ayla noticed a change within herself. She stood straighter. She spoke more confidently. Fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She wasn't just Victor Hale's young wife anymore. She was becoming stronger in her own right. Victor noticed the change too. During dinner one evening, he watched her quietly as she spoke about her studies and training. "You're adapting quickly," he said. "I didn't have a choice," Ayla replied. "But I won't be helpless." A faint smile crossed his face. "I never thought you were." That small moment lingered longer than it should have. Despite the growing danger, moments of unexpected normalcy began to appear. Victor and Ayla occasionally shared conversations that went beyond surface-level topics. He spoke about his early struggles, about building his empire from nothing, about the betrayals that shaped him. Ayla listened, beginning to understand the loneliness behind his control. He wasn't just protecting his power, he was protecting himself from being hurt again. One evening, a storm rolled in, thunder echoing across the estate. The power flickered briefly before stabilizing. Ayla, unsettled, found herself in the library, seeking distraction. Victor joined her minutes later, carrying 2 cups of tea. "My mother hated storms," he said quietly, handing her a cup. "She said they reminded her that even strong structures can be shaken." Ayla met his gaze. "But they don't always fall." "No," Victor agreed. "They don't." The moment felt strangely intimate. Not romantic, but honest. Two people bound by circumstance, finding understanding in shared vulnerability. That fragile calm shattered days later. Ayla received a message on her phone from an unknown number. "You don't belong there." Her blood ran cold. She showed the message to Victor immediately. His expression darkened in a way she hadn't seen before. "This is escalating," he said. Security tightened further. Victor restricted public appearances. The mansion felt more closed off than ever. Ayla tried to stay calm, but the message replayed in her mind endlessly. Someone out there wanted her scared, and they were succeeding. One night, Ayla overheard Victor arguing again, this time with multiple voices on a conference call. Words like threat, leverage, and pressure slipped through the door. She realized then that she wasn't just a symbol anymore. She was leverage. Later, Victor came to her room, stopping at the doorway. "I need you to trust me," he said. "Things may get worse before they get better." Ayla took a deep breath. "I'm not a pawn, Victor." He nodded slowly. "No, you're not. But you married me knowing I'd be in danger," she continued. "If I'm going to face this, I deserve the truth. All of it." Victor hesitated, then said, "Soon. I promise." As he walked away, Ayla felt a strange resolve settle inside her. She had been afraid when this marriage began. Afraid of Victor. Afraid of the unknown. But now, the fear had shifted. She wasn't afraid of being Victor Hale's wife anymore. She was afraid of what would happen if she ever stopped fighting for herself. And whoever thought she didn't belong here was about to learn one thing the hard way. Ayla Carter was no longer just surviving. She was ready to stand her ground. The warning message changed everything. Ayla could feel it in the air, in the way Victor's voice grew sharper, in the way security doubled without explanation. The mansion no longer felt like a place of safety, it felt like the center of a storm. Every day that passed without answers only strengthened Ayla's determination. She was done being protected by silence. If her life was being used as leverage, she deserved to know why. Victor noticed her restlessness. One evening, after dinner, he asked her to join him in the study. The door closed behind them with a heavy finality. He gestured for her to sit, then remained standing, as if bracing himself. "You were right," he said. "You deserve the truth." Ayla's heart pounded, but she stayed calm. "Then tell me." Victor took a deep breath. "Years ago, I exposed corruption within my own industry. Powerful people lost fortunes. Some went to prison, others walked free, and they never forgave me." Ayla listened carefully as he continued. He explained how threats had followed him for years, how attempts had been made to destabilize his businesses, how alliances turned into betrayals. Publicly, Victor Hale was untouchable. Privately, he was constantly under attack. "They can't destroy me directly," he said. "So they target what gives me legitimacy. Stability. A public image of control." Ayla understood immediately. "A wife." "Yes," Victor said quietly. "A marriage makes me harder to attack legally and socially. It also gives them something to threaten." The room felt smaller. "You married me knowing this would happen." Victor met her eyes. "I married you knowing it could happen. I hoped it wouldn't." Ayla stood up slowly, anger and hurt colliding inside her. "You hoped." Her voice shook despite her effort to stay composed. "My life isn't a risk calculation." "No," Victor said firmly. "And that's why I'm trying to end this before it gets worse." The word stunned her. "End it. Not the marriage," he clarified. "The threat." Victor explained that he planned to expose the remaining individuals behind the attacks, even if it meant risking his empire. He had gathered evidence for years but never used it, knowing the fallout would be severe. "If I move now," he said, "they'll retaliate." Ayla swallowed hard. "And I'll be in danger." "Yes." Silence filled the room. Ayla felt torn between fear and an unexpected sense of responsibility. She had never asked for this life, but she was already in it. Walking away emotionally wouldn't erase the reality. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Victor looked surprised. "Nothing. I'll send you away somewhere safe." Ayla shook her head. "No. I'm tired of running from things I didn't choose. If this affects me, I want to face it." Victor's gaze softened. "You shouldn't have to." "Maybe," she said. "But I do." Days later, the retaliation began. News broke of investigations into Victor's companies. Headlines questioned his ethics. Stock prices fluctuated wildly. Anonymous sources fed stories to the media, painting Victor as ruthless and unstable. Ayla watched it all unfold, realizing how quickly public opinion could turn. Friends she had never had before now avoided mentioning her name. One evening, a car followed Ayla's vehicle on the way back from a medical appointment. The driver noticed immediately, taking evasive routes until security intercepted. Ayla arrived home shaken but unharmed. Victor said nothing when he saw her, only pulled her into a brief, protective embrace before stepping away, as if afraid to let himself linger. That night, the estate went into lockdown. Ayla couldn't sleep. The weight of everything pressed down on her chest. She wandered into the hallway and found Victor in the control room, watching security feeds with intense focus. "You don't have to do this alone," she said. He looked at her, exhaustion written across his face. "I never wanted you to see this side of my life. But I do," she replied. "And I'm still here." In that moment, something shifted between them. The wall that had always existed, built from contracts and caution, began to crack. Not because of romance, but because of trust. The following day, Victor released the evidence. The impact was immediate and explosive. Arrests were made. Names were revealed. Powerful figures fell from grace overnight. The world watched in shock as the truth unraveled. But victory came at a cost. That evening, Ayla received another message, shorter and colder than the last: "You chose the wrong side." Before she could show Victor, alarms blared throughout the estate. Security rushed into motion. A breach had been detected at the outer perimeter. Ayla's heart raced as guards escorted her to a secure room. Minutes felt like hours. She tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself she wasn't helpless anymore. Then the door opened. Victor stepped inside, unharmed but tense. "We're moving you," he said. Now, as they rushed through hidden corridors, Ayla realized how close danger truly was. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real. They reached a reinforced exit where a vehicle waited. Victor paused, gripping Ayla's hand tightly. "I'm sorry," he said. "For all of this." Ayla met his gaze, fear and determination burning together. "Just promise me one thing. Anything. No more secrets." Victor nodded. "No more." As the car sped into the night, Ayla understood something she hadn't before. The truth was powerful, but it was also dangerous. And by choosing to stand beside Victor, she had crossed a line that could never be undone. The question was no longer whether she belonged in this world. It was whether she would survive it. The safe house was nothing like the Hale estate. It was smaller, quieter, and intentionally unremarkable, hidden far from the city and surrounded by thick woods instead of iron gates. For the first time since marrying Victor, Ayla felt something close to normalcy. No cameras in the halls, no staff moving silently in the background, no reminders of power and danger in every corner. And yet, the tension between her and Victor was heavier than ever. They were here because someone wanted them hurt. That truth followed them into every room. The first night passed without sleep. Ayla sat by the window, watching the trees sway in the wind, listening for sounds that might signal danger. Victor remained awake as well, speaking quietly with security through encrypted calls. When he finally joined her, there was something different in his expression, less control, more humanity. "You shouldn't have had to see any of this," he said. Ayla didn't look away from the window. "I stopped being, shouldn't, the day I said yes." Victor nodded slowly. "If you want to leave, I can arrange it. New identity. A clean break." Ayla turned to face him. "And spend my life hiding." "Yes," he said honestly. "Safe." She shook her head. "That's not living. That's surviving." Silence settled between them. For the first time, Ayla realized Victor wasn't just offering her escape, he was preparing himself to lose her. The thought stirred something unexpected in her chest. Over the next few days, the world outside the safe house erupted. News outlets covered the fallout from Victor's revelations nonstop. More arrests followed. Lawsuits piled up. Victor's empire shook but didn't fall. The public was divided, some praised his courage, others condemned his methods. Through it all, Ayla watched quietly, absorbing the reality that her life was now tied to events shaping entire industries. One afternoon, while reviewing news updates on a tablet, Ayla noticed a pattern. Several companies attacking Victor publicly were connected through shell corporations. The names triggered something from her business courses. She spent hours digging deeper, mapping connections, following financial trails. It was complicated, but the picture became clearer. That evening, she approached Victor with her findings. "These companies," she said, laying out the information, "they're coordinating. Not just reacting." Victor studied the data, his expression shifting from surprise to respect. "You found this on your own?" "Yes," Ayla replied. "And I think they're planning something bigger." For the first time, Victor didn't shield her from the conversation. He invited her into it. They worked side by side late into the night, analyzing threats and strategies. Ayla realized she wasn't just standing beside Victor anymore, she was contributing. Her mind, once overlooked, was now a weapon of its own. But danger was never far. A car was spotted near the safe house late one night. Security neutralized the threat before it escalated, but the message was clear: they had been found. Again, Victor made the decision quickly. "We can't keep moving," he said. "They'll follow us. Then we stop running," Ayla said. Victor looked at her sharply. "This isn't a game." "I know," she replied. "But neither is fear. They expect us to hide. What if we don't?" Her words lingered. The next morning, Victor held a press conference. Against his advisor's warnings, he appeared publicly, with Ayla at his side. Cameras flashed as they stepped onto the stage. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The young wife. The silent one. Until now. Victor spoke first, addressing the allegations, the arrests, the threats. Then, unexpectedly, he stepped back. Ayla took the microphone. Her heart pounded, but her voice was steady. She spoke about choice, about responsibility, about the cost of truth. She didn't reveal secrets or play the victim. She spoke as someone who refused to be erased. I didn't choose this world, she said. But I choose how I stand in it. The response was immediate. Social media exploded. Public perception shifted. Ayla was no longer a weakness, she was a presence. That night, back at the safe house, Victor watched her quietly. You change the narrative, he said. They won't see you as leverage anymore. Ayla met his gaze. That was the point. In the quiet that followed, something unspoken passed between them. Respect had grown into something deeper, not romantic fantasy, but trust forged under pressure. Still, the danger wasn't over. An encrypted message arrived hours later, this time not threatening Ayla, but warning Victor. Next time, we won't miss. Victor read it without reaction, then deleted it. He looked at Ayla, determination burning in his eyes. They're desperate now, he said. Which makes them dangerous. Ayla nodded. Then we stay ready. As night fell, Ayla realized how far she had come from the frightened 19-year-old standing in front of a mirror on her wedding day. She was still young, still learning, but she was no longer powerless. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on. Not as a pawn, not as a shield, but as a woman who had stepped into the fire and refused to burn. The following weeks were a whirlwind of strategy, tension, and unrelenting pressure. Ayla no longer saw herself as the naive 19-year-old who had been forced into a marriage with a 50-year-old billionaire. Every choice she made now carried weight, every decision had consequence, and every action drew attention. She had learned to read the room, anticipate threats, and, most importantly, trust her instincts. Victor had trained her in ways no one could have predicted, but it was her own courage that kept them ahead of those who wanted to destroy him, and her. The Hale estate, once a cold and distant fortress, felt like home now, though not for comfort. It was home for power, for survival, for intelligence and strategy. Security measures had reached a level that few could imagine, cameras with facial recognition, biometric locks, and a team of professionals ready to act instantly. Victor had allowed Ayla to participate in decision-making, and she had stepped up, reviewing threats, noticing patterns, even predicting the movements of those who had once thought her weak. The person who had once trembled at the thought of walking down the aisle was now actively shaping outcomes, and Victor noticed every step she took. One evening, while reviewing the latest intelligence reports in the library, Victor leaned back in his chair and studied her. "You've grown fast," he said quietly. "Faster than I ever expected." Ayla didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were on a set of files detailing the remaining threats, their connections, and weaknesses. "I had no choice but to adapt," she said finally. "And if I'm honest, I want to see this through. Not just survive, but make sure no one else uses me, or us, as leverage again." Victor smiled faintly, something almost human breaking through the usual mask of control. "That's the thing about you," he said. "You don't just follow. You plan. You execute. You survive." Their calm was shattered the next morning by an unmarked car parked suspiciously near the estate gates. Security detected it immediately. Ayla stood beside Victor, her heart racing, not with fear, but with readiness. Every scenario they had prepared for played out in her mind. Within minutes, the vehicle was intercepted and removed. The intruder had been testing them, but the attempt only confirmed one thing: Ayla's presence was a threat to those who had underestimated her. That night, Victor and Ayla sat together overlooking the city from the mansion's balcony. The skyline stretched before them, glittering with lights, yet beneath that beauty, Ayla saw danger lurking in every shadow. "I never imagined I'd be here like this," she admitted softly. "Not just married, but fighting. Not just for you, but for me. For my life." Victor's hand brushed hers. It was brief, yet the touch carried weight. "You're more than a wife," he said. "You're my equal in this. And that scares people more than anything else." Ayla nodded, a strange warmth settling in her chest. The fear that had once dominated her life was no longer hers alone. It had been transformed into something powerful, into strategy, into action, into clarity. The final confrontation came sooner than either of them expected. Intelligence indicated that a coordinated attack was imminent. Several of Victor's old rivals had joined forces, determined to strike before the empire stabilized. Ayla, fully involved in the planning, studied every detail meticulously. Her instincts had sharpened, she saw patterns others missed. Together, she and Victor orchestrated a counter-move that would neutralize the threat permanently. The night of the attack, the estate was a fortress in action. Security personnel moved efficiently, guided by Victor's and Ayla's commands. The attackers attempted multiple breaches, but each was countered methodically. Cameras, sensors, and quick strategic decisions prevented any real harm. Ayla remained in the command room, eyes flicking between monitors, coordinating defenses, calling out instructions with calm authority. She was no longer helpless. She was decisive. She was a force. By dawn, the threat had been neutralized. The attackers had been captured, their plans dismantled, and Victor's empire remained intact. Exhausted but triumphant, Ayla and Victor stood together in the quiet aftermath. For the first time, the tension between them eased. They looked at each other not as husband and wife in a forced marriage, but as partners, equal, capable, and unshakable. Victor broke the silence. "You were incredible," he said simply. "I couldn't have done it without you." Ayla smiled, the weight of months of fear, uncertainty, and growth finally lifting. "Neither could I without you," she replied. "But I also couldn't have done it alone. That's the difference. I didn't just survive this, I participated." Victor nodded, a rare softness in his eyes. "You've changed everything," he said. "Not just for yourself, but for me. For us." For the first time, Ayla felt truly free. Freedom wasn't in avoiding danger. Freedom wasn't in hiding. Freedom was in standing tall, even when the odds were against her. She had entered the marriage terrified, powerless, and young. She emerged as someone formidable, confident, and unafraid to face the world head-on. The public soon noticed the transformation too. Ayla Carter was no longer the silent young bride. Interviews, appearances, and philanthropy initiatives showcased her as a capable and influential figure in her own right. Social media buzzed about her intelligence, her courage, and her leadership. Those who had once underestimated her were forced to recognize that she was not just Victor Hale's wife, she was a presence that commanded attention and respect. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the mansion terrace, Victor turned to her. "Do you ever regret saying yes?" he asked quietly. Ayla considered it, reflecting on the past months of fear, growth, and self-discovery. "No," she said finally. "Because I didn't just marry you. I found myself. And whatever comes next, I know I can face it." Victor smiled, a rare and genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Then we move forward," he said. "Together. Together." The word carried more weight than any luxury, any power, any fear they had faced. It meant trust, respect, and partnership. Ayla no longer felt like a pawn in someone else's game. She was a player, strong, fearless, and fully present in her life. As night fell over the city, Ayla Carter stood by Victor Hale's side, no longer the scared 19-year-old forced into a life she didn't choose. She was a woman who had faced danger, confronted secrets, and fought for control over her own destiny. The threats that had once loomed over her like shadows had been confronted, and she had not only survived, they had made her stronger. The journey had been terrifying, unpredictable, and relentless. But Ayla knew this: life would never be easy. It would never be without risk. Yet now, armed with courage, intelligence, and the unwavering support of someone who had once seemed untouchable, she was ready. Ready to face whatever storms came next. She was no longer silent. She was no longer powerless. And most importantly, she was no longer afraid. Ayla Carter had stepped into a world that tried to control her, but she had emerged on her own terms, unstoppable, unshakable, and alive.